Have you ever wondered if we are living in the final days of the world as we know it? What if the signs are all around us, and we've been ignoring them for far too long? The world as we understand it seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. And every day, new warnings and omens emerge, pointing to an inevitable collapse. Climate change, natural disasters, social unrest, economic decline. Each of these signs paints a picture that seems too real to ignore. But are these the end times? Or are they simply the inevitable consequence of human actions over centuries? In recent years, the earth has been shaking, both literally and figuratively. The frequency of natural disasters has skyrocketed, storms that tear through entire regions, wildfires that rage uncontrollably, earthquakes and tsunamis that leave devastation in their wake. These catastrophic events seem to be happening more and more frequently. And yet, our response is often too little, too late. But the crisis isn't just environmental. Look around, and you'll notice the growing instability in global politics. Nations are at odds more than ever. Alliances are crumbling, and old tensions are flaring up once again. This isn't just about isolated incidents or rogue states, it's a global phenomenon. Leaders speak of wars and conflicts as if they are inevitable, and the media churns out stories of political chaos daily. The fabric of society is being torn apart, and we are left wondering, is this a mere sign of a failing system? Or the prelude to something much larger? And then, there's the economy. Global markets are on edge, and the signs of a looming financial collapse are becoming harder to ignore. Countries are drowning in debt, inflation is soaring, and unemployment rates are climbing. The wealthy get richer while the poor fall further behind. This growing inequality is fueling anger and disillusionment, and people are starting to question the very systems that have supported this imbalance for so long. But it's not just the world's systems that are under threat, it's the very fabric of human existence. We've entered an era where misinformation runs rampant. Trust in institutions is at an all-time low, and many people feel disconnected from the world around them. It's as if the things that once held our societies together, values, truths, and ideals, are crumbling into dust. So, what does all this mean? Are we on the brink of a global apocalypse? Or is this just the inevitable cycle of history repeating itself? Could these signs be the precursor to something far worse than we can imagine? And most importantly, what can we do about it? Today, we will explore the clues that suggest the end times may not just be a myth or fantasy, but a real possibility, and how we might learn from these ominous signs to prepare for the uncertain future ahead. Stay with me as we uncover the clues that could reveal the truth behind the apocalypse that may be closer than we think. In recent years, the signs of an impending global collapse have become more and more apparent. The once predictable rhythms of nature seem to have become erratic, as if the planet itself is struggling to maintain its balance. Climate change, long regarded as a distant threat, is now front and center in the global conversation. Its effects are undeniable, and the consequences are already being felt across the globe in ways that we can no longer ignore. One of the most noticeable signs of this impending collapse is the unprecedented increase in natural disasters. Storms that were once considered rare and catastrophic are now striking with terrifying frequency. Take, for instance, the rise of superstorms like Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines in 2013. This storm was one of the most powerful ever recorded, with winds reaching speeds of 195 miles per hour. It left a path of destruction in its wake, claiming over 6,000 lives and displacing millions of people. While this storm was certainly devastating, it was not an isolated incident. In fact, over the last few decades, the frequency and intensity of typhoons, hurricanes, and cyclones have increased exponentially. But it's not just tropical storms that are wreaking havoc on the planet. Wildfires, once contained to certain seasons or regions, have become a year-round problem. In 2019, wildfires ravaged large portions of Australia, burning more than 18 million acres of land and killing at least 33 people. The fires, fueled by extreme heat and prolonged drought, created what some referred to as apocalyptic conditions. with skies turning a dull orange and air quality reaching hazardous levels in major cities. The scale and intensity of the fires were unprecedented, and the aftermath left millions of Australians grappling with the long-term effects of the disaster. While these events are tragic, they are not isolated. All around the world, we are seeing similar patterns. In California, wildfires have become an annual crisis, with entire towns destroyed in a matter of days. In 2020, the state saw its largest wildfire in history, burning more than 4 million acres of land and displacing tens of thousands of people. In the Amazon rainforest, a critical part of the Earth's ecosystem, fires have been increasing at an alarming rate. The Amazon, often referred to as the lungs of the planet, is being decimated by both natural and human-induced fires, threatening biodiversity and the global climate. But the problem doesn't stop there. Earthquakes, too, have been striking with increasing regularity. In 2010, Haiti was devastated by a 7.0 magnitude earthquake, which killed over 230,000 people and caused widespread destruction. Just a decade later, the 2020 earthquake in Turkey and Greece, which reached a magnitude of 7.0, left hundreds dead and thousands injured. These tremors serve as constant reminders of how fragile the Earth's crust can be, and how unprepared we are for the next major quake. Tsunamis, too, have become a recurring threat, particularly in regions near tectonic plate boundaries. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which killed over 230,000 people across 14 countries, was one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. Although much time has passed, the risk of such an event occurring again remains high. The 2011 tsunami in Japan, triggered by a massive earthquake off the coast of Fukushima, demonstrated how quickly these events can escalate, leaving entire communities devastated in minutes. But it's not just the immediate destruction caused by these disasters that we need to worry about. The long-term effects of these events are just as dire. For example, the fires in California and Australia have not only destroyed homes and communities but have also had a profound impact on air quality and public health. The smoke from the wildfires has been known to travel thousands of miles, affecting people in areas far beyond the disaster zones. The rise in respiratory diseases, particularly asthma, has been linked to the increased levels of air pollution caused by these fires. Additionally, the destruction of forests and habitats has a ripple effect on wildlife populations, pushing some species to the brink of extinction. Similarly, the aftermath of earthquakes and tsunamis can lead to long-lasting economic and social instability. Cities that were once thriving may take years, if not decades, to rebuild. In some cases, the recovery process may never fully restore the area to its previous state. This ongoing instability is not just a tragedy for the people directly affected by the disasters but also a sign of the increasing fragility of our global systems. These events paint a grim picture of a world increasingly at the mercy of nature's forces. But what is causing these disasters to become so frequent and so intense? Scientists point to climate change as a key driver behind this shift. The rising global temperatures, caused by human activities like deforestation and the burning of fossil fuels, are leading to changes in weather patterns, which in turn are making storms and other natural disasters more severe. The warming of the oceans, for example, has led to the increased intensity of hurricanes and typhoons. As the ocean water warms, it provides more energy for storms to grow stronger and more destructive. The melting of polar ice caps is contributing to rising sea levels, which not only threatens coastal cities but also increases the likelihood of more frequent and severe flooding. The warming climate is also affecting the distribution of rainfall, leading to more extreme droughts in some areas and heavier rainfall in others, which increases the risk of flooding and landslides. It's clear that the planet is undergoing significant changes, and the consequences are being felt all around us. But despite the growing evidence, many people still deny the reality of climate change or fail to take the necessary steps to address it. The fact that these natural disasters are becoming more frequent and more severe should serve as a wake-up call for all of us. The Earth is sending us a clear message: the time to act is now. While the Earth trembles beneath our feet, the very foundations of society are also beginning to show signs of breaking down. Across the globe, political instability has been on the rise, and the increasingly polarized nature of social discourse is tearing apart the fabric of what were once stable democracies. If the first part of this story focuses on the planet's physical upheaval, the second part zooms in on the human struggle, our conflicts, both external and internal, that are now accelerating the march towards what some would call the end times. Take a moment to consider the rising tensions between global superpowers. The United States, China, and Russia, once viewed as the pillars of global stability, are now embroiled in an intense geopolitical struggle that is increasingly reminiscent of the Cold War. These tensions have far-reaching implications, not only for the countries directly involved but for the entire international community. In recent years, we've seen trade wars, military confrontations, cyber attacks, and diplomatic breakdowns between these global giants, as the world's most powerful nations shift away from diplomacy and cooperation. It's hard not to wonder if we are heading toward a new era of heightened conflict, a new arms race, or perhaps even a hot war. One of the most glaring indicators of this rising political tension is the breakdown of global trade. The trade wars between the United States and China, for instance, have caused a seismic disruption in the global supply chain. These two economic giants, which account for a significant portion of global trade, have levied tariffs on each other's goods, leading to price hikes and shortages of essential products. What's more, the trade war has created a ripple effect, pulling in other nations, forcing them to pick sides or bear the brunt of economic retaliation. This interdependence between nations, once seen as a stabilizing factor, has now become a vulnerability. And as countries turn inward, the stability of the global economy is increasingly uncertain. The growing tensions are not limited to just these two nations. In the Middle East, the geopolitical landscape is just as volatile. Conflicts between Iran and Saudi Arabia, fueled by religious and political differences, have resulted in proxy wars, with countries like Yemen bearing the brunt of the destruction. The situation is further complicated by the involvement of global powers, each seeking to expand their influence in the region. The resulting instability has created a vicious cycle of violence, poverty, and extremism that threatens to spill over into neighboring regions. At the same time, the rise of populist movements and authoritarian leaders has raised serious concerns about the future of democracy. From Hungary to Brazil, from the United States to Turkey, we see leaders who are undermining democratic institutions, curtailing press freedom, and consolidating power in ways that echo authoritarian regimes of the past. These leaders often capitalize on fear, anger, and division to consolidate their hold on power, feeding off the social and economic dissatisfaction of their populations. In many cases, these movements are a reaction to growing inequality, job losses, and the perceived failure of traditional political elites to address the needs of the people. But it's not just the actions of powerful leaders that are fueling this divide. Social media, once heralded as a tool for democratizing information, has become a breeding ground for misinformation, hate speech, and radicalization. The rapid spread of fake news, conspiracy theories, and divisive rhetoric has intensified political polarization, creating echo chambers where individuals are increasingly isolated from opposing viewpoints. As a result, political discourse has become more hostile, more combative, and less cooperative, making it difficult for societies to find common ground on crucial issues. The fracturing of social cohesion is perhaps most evident in the rise of identity politics. In many parts of the world, people are increasingly identifying not with a shared national identity but with smaller, more fragmented groups, be it racial, religious, or ideological. This fragmentation has led to a breakdown in social unity, with people becoming more entrenched in their own beliefs and less willing to compromise or engage with others. While diversity and inclusion are valuable ideals, the way these concepts are being applied in many places today is leading to more division rather than unity. At the heart of this political and social fragmentation is a deeper problem, a growing sense of disillusionment. In the past, people believed in the promise of progress, that with hard work and determination, society could be improved. But today, many people feel as though the system is rigged against them, that the rich and powerful hold all the cards, while the rest of the population is left to fend for themselves. This sense of disenfranchisement has led to widespread frustration, which has been channeled into anger and resentment. We are witnessing the rise of populist movements that promise to upend the system, often by embracing nationalism and rejecting globalization. The effects of this social and political fragmentation are profound. First and foremost, the growing divide between rich and poor has created a volatile environment, where resentment and frustration boil over into protest and unrest. The social contract that once held societies together is breaking down, and as a result, we are witnessing increasing instances of violence, rioting, and civil disobedience in places like France, where the Yellow Vest movement began as a response to rising fuel taxes. Citizens have taken to the streets in opposition to government policies, highlighting the growing disconnect between the ruling elite and ordinary people. This growing social unrest is not limited to any one region or country. Across the world, from Hong Kong to Chile to Lebanon, people are rising up in protest against governments they see as corrupt, ineffective, or out of touch with their needs. These protests are not isolated incidents but part of a larger, global trend. People are no longer willing to accept the status quo, and they are demanding change. Whether that change comes through peaceful protest, violent revolution, or something in between, one thing is clear: societies are no longer content with the way things are. These political, economic, and social divisions have serious implications for the future. As countries become more insular and less cooperative, the world's systems of trade, diplomacy, and cooperation are fraying at the edges. What happens when global alliances begin to collapse? What happens when countries retreat into nationalism and abandon the ideals of mutual benefit and cooperation? The answer may lie in the ever-present threat of war, whether in the form of localized conflicts, civil wars, or even a broader, global confrontation. The signs are all there, and they are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. As the world becomes more divided, both politically and socially, we may find ourselves facing the most difficult challenges in human history. But if we are to avoid the collapse of civilization as we know it, we must come to terms with these divisions and seek ways to rebuild the bridges that once connected us. As we look at the signs of an impending apocalypse, we cannot ignore the looming threat of a global economic collapse. While natural disasters and political instability grab headlines, the underlying economic trends are just as alarming, if not more so. For years, economists have warned about the instability of the global economy, citing unsustainable debt levels, financial bubbles, and economic inequality. Yet, the warning signs seem to be ignored, and the system continues to operate in a state of fragile equilibrium, teetering on the brink of disaster. The most glaring warning sign is the ever-growing mountain of global debt. National debts have reached record levels, with many countries borrowing at unsustainable rates to fund their operations and services. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, global debt reached an all-time high of over $270 trillion in 2020. This staggering figure represents more than 3 times the size of the global economy. For many countries, servicing this debt has become a major drain on their resources, and the risk of default is ever present. While central banks around the world have been attempting to mitigate this risk through low interest rates and monetary easing, these measures are only postponing the inevitable. Sooner or later, the debt burden will become too great to manage, and a financial crisis will erupt, affecting not only the nations involved but also the global economy at large. Another troubling sign of economic instability is the rise of financial bubbles. The most recent example of this is the soaring stock market in many developed nations. Despite the economic turmoil caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, stock markets have reached unprecedented heights, with indexes like the S&P 500 in the United States hitting record highs. This is a classic sign of a financial bubble, where asset prices become disconnected from their underlying value. Investors are pouring money into the market, driven by speculative optimism, rather than the fundamentals of economic growth. When the bubble bursts, as it inevitably will, the consequences will be devastating. The collapse of the stock market will wipe out billions in wealth, leading to widespread unemployment, economic contraction, and a deepening recession. The housing market, too, is showing signs of a potential crash. In many parts of the world, particularly in the United States, the UK, and Australia, property prices have skyrocketed to levels that are simply unaffordable for the average person. This has led to a housing bubble, where home prices are driven up by speculation and demand that far exceeds supply. As more and more people become unable to afford homes, the market will eventually collapse under its own weight, leaving millions of people with negative equity and causing a widespread economic meltdown. The housing crisis of 2008, which led to the global financial crisis, serves as a painful reminder of what happens when the housing market becomes unsustainable. But perhaps the most alarming trend in the global economy is the growing wealth inequality. The divide between the rich and the poor has never been wider, and the gap continues to grow at an alarming rate. According to Oxfam, the world's richest 1% now own more than half of the world's wealth, while the poorest half of the population collectively own just 1% of global wealth. This staggering inequality is not only morally troubling, but it is also a threat to social stability. As the wealthy continue to accumulate more wealth, the middle class and working poor are being squeezed out, leading to rising frustration, resentment, and social unrest. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a few has led to a concentration of power as well, with the wealthy exerting an outsized influence on politics, policy, and the economy. This concentration of power is further deepening the divide between the elite and the rest of society, creating a volatile situation that is ripe for collapse. As the global economy becomes increasingly unstable, we are also seeing the breakdown of traditional economic systems. The rise of automation and artificial intelligence is displacing millions of workers, leaving many without the skills or opportunities to adapt to the changing job market. In industries like manufacturing, retail, and transportation, automation is replacing human labor at a rapid pace. While this technological progress may seem like a step forward, it comes at a significant cost. Millions of jobs are being lost, and entire communities are being left behind. The resulting unemployment and social unrest will only add to the instability of the global economy, as the disaffected masses demand change. At the same time, the gig economy and the rise of temporary, low-wage jobs have further eroded the traditional notion of job security. More and more people are finding themselves in precarious work situations, with no benefits, no job security, and little hope for advancement. This shift in the labor market is contributing to a sense of economic insecurity, which is fueling political instability and societal unrest, as more people fall into poverty or struggle to make ends meet. The fabric of society begins to fray, creating the perfect conditions for an economic collapse. What's even more troubling is the fact that many governments are ill-equipped to deal with these economic challenges. In many cases, governments are in debt up to their eyeballs, leaving them with limited ability to respond to economic crises. As central banks continue to print money to finance government spending, inflation is becoming an ever-present threat. The value of currencies is eroding, and the purchasing power of everyday people is decreasing. This is creating a vicious cycle, where rising prices make it even harder for people to afford basic necessities, further fueling social unrest. The situation is made even worse by the increasing volatility of global markets. In recent years, we have seen a series of economic shocks that have sent shockwaves through the global economy. The 2008 global financial crisis, the European debt crisis, and the COVID-19 pandemic are just a few examples of the ways in which the global economy is increasingly vulnerable to external shocks. These events have exposed the fragility of the economic system, and the risk of a cascading financial collapse is greater than ever. As the global economy teeters on the brink of collapse, many are beginning to ask, what can we do to prevent the inevitable? The answer is not simple, but it starts with acknowledging the scale of the problem. We can no longer ignore the warning signs or hope that things will get better on their own. It is up to governments, businesses, and individuals to take action, whether through reducing debt, reinvesting in infrastructure, or addressing inequality. But perhaps the most important lesson is that we must be prepared. Whether it's through building financial security, learning new skills, or investing in resilient communities, the key to surviving the coming storm is preparation. As we continue to examine the escalating signs of the apocalypse, one of the most undeniable and pressing indicators is the ongoing environmental crisis. From rising sea levels to increasingly frequent and severe weather events, the warning signs are not only evident but accelerating at an alarming rate. If we look at the planet's changing climate, we see a world that is quickly spiraling into a state of irreversible damage, with disastrous consequences for both humanity and the natural world. The most prominent of these environmental signs is, of course, the reality of climate change. Over the past century, global temperatures have risen at an unprecedented rate, with the last few decades being the warmest on record. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, the planet has already warmed by approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times, and this trend shows no sign of slowing. While 1.1 degrees Celsius might sound like a small number, the impacts of this temperature increase are far-reaching and profound. The Arctic ice is melting at an accelerated pace, threatening to raise sea levels and inundate coastal cities around the world. At the same time, extreme weather events such as heat waves, storms, and floods are becoming more common, with devastating effects on local communities and economies. But it's not just the warming of the planet that should concern us. The impacts of climate change are being felt in a multitude of ways that are destabilizing ecosystems across the globe. Coral reefs, which support a quarter of all marine life, are bleaching at an unprecedented rate due to rising sea temperatures, threatening entire ecosystems and the livelihoods of millions of people who depend on fishing for sustenance. In the Amazon rainforest, known as the lungs of the earth, deforestation has reached critical levels, with vast swaths of forest being destroyed every year to make way for agriculture, logging, and mining. This not only contributes to the loss of biodiversity but also accelerates the rate of carbon dioxide emissions, further exacerbating the climate crisis. Perhaps the most alarming aspect of the environmental crisis is the feedback loops that are now in motion. As the planet warms, it triggers a series of events that amplify the effects of climate change, creating a vicious cycle. For example, as ice melts in the Arctic, it reduces the Earth's albedo, meaning less sunlight is reflected back into space, and more is absorbed by the planet's surface. This, in turn, leads to even more warming, further accelerating the melting of ice. Similarly, as forests are cleared, they release large amounts of stored carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, contributing to further warming and creating a feedback loop that is difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. Another alarming sign of the environmental apocalypse is the loss of biodiversity. Scientists estimate that we are currently experiencing a mass extinction event, with species disappearing at a rate that is 1.000 times faster than the natural rate of extinction. The destruction of habitats, pollution, climate change, and overexploitation of natural resources have all contributed to this decline in biodiversity. From the decimation of insect populations to the near extinction of large mammals like the tiger and the elephant, the planet is losing species at an alarming rate. This loss of biodiversity is not only a tragedy in its own right but also poses a significant threat to human survival. Healthy ecosystems provide us with essential services such as pollination, clean air, and water, and the loss of these services could have catastrophic consequences for food security and human health. The impact of environmental degradation is also being felt in the form of natural disasters. Wildfires, floods, hurricanes, and droughts have become more frequent and severe in recent years. And scientists are increasingly linking these events to the broader patterns of climate change. In Australia, for example, the 2019-2020 bushfire season, known as Black Summer, was one of the worst on record, burning over 18 million hectares of land and killing at least 3 billion animals. In the United States, devastating hurricanes like Hurricane Katrina in 2005 and Hurricane Harvey in 2017 have caused billions of dollars in damages and displaced thousands of people. The economic costs of these disasters are staggering, but the human toll is even greater, as communities are uprooted and lives are destroyed. Perhaps most shocking of all is the fact that despite the overwhelming evidence of environmental degradation, the global response has been largely inadequate. Governments have been slow to act, often prioritizing short-term economic growth over long-term sustainability. The Paris Agreement, which set a goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, has failed to produce the necessary changes. With many nations not living up to their commitments, fossil fuel consumption continues to rise, and industries that contribute to pollution and environmental degradation are often subsidized, rather than held accountable. Even when action is taken, it is often too little, too late. For example, the United States' withdrawal from the Paris Agreement under the Trump administration was a significant setback in the global fight against climate change. And despite a renewed commitment under President Biden, it remains to be seen whether global efforts will be enough to avert catastrophe. The failure to address these issues is not only an environmental disaster but also an economic one. As climate change accelerates, its effects are being felt in every sector of the economy. Agriculture, for example, is becoming increasingly unpredictable, with changing weather patterns causing crop failures and food shortages in many parts of the world. The fishing industry is facing similar challenges as ocean temperatures rise and marine ecosystems collapse. Tourism, another major global industry, is also being affected by the environmental crisis, as natural wonders such as coral reefs and national parks become damaged or inaccessible. The financial costs of these impacts are already immense, and as climate change continues to worsen, they will only increase. As we confront the reality of the environmental apocalypse, we are left to wonder, what can be done to prevent it? The first step is acknowledging the scale of the crisis. The environmental challenges we face are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader, interconnected web of issues that are threatening the future of life on Earth. We must move beyond short-term solutions and start thinking long-term, focusing on sustainability, conservation, and the preservation of our planet's ecosystems. This means transitioning away from fossil fuels, investing in renewable energy, protecting biodiversity, and adopting sustainable practices across every sector of the economy. It also means holding corporations and governments accountable for their role in causing environmental destruction. The path forward will not be easy, and the consequences of inaction will be dire. But if we act now, we still have a chance to mitigate the worst effects of climate change and prevent the full-scale environmental collapse that is on the horizon. However, time is running out, and if we wait too long, the damage may be irreversible. As the world grapples with the existential threats posed by climate change and economic instability, one of the most insidious and destabilizing forces is the rising tide of political and social unrest. From rising authoritarianism to deepening political polarization, the signs of societal fracture are unmistakable. The question is no longer whether these tensions will result in conflict, but when and to what extent. The very fabric of global society is being pulled apart, and what is emerging is a divided, unstable world that could very well lead to a larger-scale collapse. One of the most alarming developments in recent years has been the rise of authoritarian regimes around the world. Leaders with authoritarian tendencies have increasingly gained power, using populist rhetoric and exploiting fears of the unknown to consolidate control. Countries that were once seen as stable democracies are now facing the erosion of their democratic institutions. In places like Hungary, Poland, and Turkey, governments have cracked down on press freedoms, weakened the independence of the judiciary, and undermined civil rights. In the United States, former President Donald Trump's rhetoric and policies were a significant catalyst for the rise of far-right extremism, fostering division and distrust within the political system. This rise in authoritarianism is not limited to the developed world. In Latin America, Asia, and Africa, leaders are increasingly using authoritarian tactics to hold onto power, suppress dissent, and limit the freedoms of their citizens. In countries like Venezuela and Belarus, where opposition movements have been brutally repressed, the promise of democracy seems further out of reach than ever before. What these authoritarian governments share is a disregard for the principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, which creates a political environment that fosters instability and, ultimately, chaos. In addition to the rise of authoritarianism, the world is also witnessing a growing polarization of politics. In many countries, political divisions have become so deep that compromise and cooperation seem impossible. Political parties are no longer just differing on policy, they are increasingly defined by ideology, with each side viewing the other as a threat to the very existence of society. This us versus them mentality has led to an atmosphere of extreme political tribalism, where disagreements are no longer seen as legitimate differences of opinion but as existential battles that must be won at all costs. In the United States, the polarization between the left and right has reached unprecedented levels, exacerbated by the rise of social media and the spread of misinformation. The 2020 presidential election was marked by unprecedented levels of division, with many people seeing the outcome not as the result of a democratic process, but as a matter of life or death. The storming of the U.S. Capitol in January 2021 was a stark illustration of how deep political divisions can lead to violence and the erosion of democratic norms. Similarly, in the UK, the Brexit referendum created a deep divide within the country, with the debate over leaving the European Union becoming not just a political argument but a cultural and identity-based conflict. This political polarization is not confined to just a few countries. Across Europe, Latin America, and Asia, similar trends are occurring, with populist movements gaining traction and undermining traditional political institutions. In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro's policies and rhetoric have led to widespread protests and clashes between his supporters and opponents. In the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte's brutal war on drugs has sparked international condemnation and fueled political unrest. In India, the rise of Hindu nationalism under Prime Minister Narendra Modi has led to increasing tensions between religious communities, deepening divisions within the country. The rise of populist and extremist movements has also fueled a dangerous trend of nationalism, where countries are turning inward, rejecting globalization, and focusing on their own interests at the expense of international cooperation. This isolationist mindset is threatening to undo decades of diplomatic progress, as countries abandon multilateral agreements and international organizations that have helped maintain global peace and stability. The United States' withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization during the Trump administration, as well as the UK's departure from the European Union, are just two examples of how nationalism is undermining global cooperation. While political instability and authoritarianism are major threats to global stability, the more insidious threat may be the increasing sense of inequality and injustice within societies. Economic inequality has reached levels not seen since the Gilded Age, with the richest 1% of the global population owning more wealth than the bottom 99%. In the United States, the wealth gap between the top 1% and the rest of the population has continued to grow, with the richest Americans seeing their fortunes grow exponentially, while wages for the middle and working classes have stagnated for decades. This economic inequality has led to a sense of disillusionment and resentment, particularly among younger generations who feel that they have been left behind by a system that favors the wealthy. The resulting anger and frustration have led to widespread protests and social movements, particularly in the wake of events like the killing of George Floyd and the global Black Lives Matter protests. The demand for greater social justice, equality, and political representation has become a central issue in many countries, with calls for systemic change growing louder. However, the response from governments has often been inadequate, with many leaders dismissing the demands of the people or responding with violence and repression. This growing sense of injustice and inequality is fueling a cycle of violence, unrest, and political fragmentation. As the divide between the rich and poor grows wider, social tensions are intensifying, and the prospects for a peaceful resolution seem increasingly remote. The frustration of marginalized groups, combined with the failure of political leaders to address their grievances, creates a volatile environment where conflict is all but inevitable. In many ways, these political and social divisions are a microcosm of the larger global crisis. The inability of nations to cooperate, the rise of nationalism and authoritarianism, and the growing sense of inequality and injustice are all contributing to an unstable world that is increasingly ripe for collapse. The lack of trust in institutions, the erosion of democratic norms, and the breakdown of social cohesion are creating a powder keg of discontent that could explode at any moment. As we stand at the precipice of what seems like an inevitable collapse, the question on everyone's mind is, what now? How do we respond to a world that is teetering on the brink of chaos? Where every major system, environmental, political, economic, appears to be unraveling? Is there hope for humanity? Or are we doomed to a future marked by calamity and despair? The truth is that the signs of an impending apocalypse are undeniable. But that does not mean all hope is lost. While the future may seem bleak, there are opportunities for change, for redemption, and for rethinking the way we live, work, and relate to one another. The key lies in our collective response, the choices we make now, and the lessons we can draw from the past. A call for preparedness and resilience. One of the most powerful lessons from history is that preparedness is critical to survival in times of crisis. Those who are proactive, who plan ahead, and who anticipate the challenges that lie ahead are far more likely to weather the storms of life, whether those storms are natural, economic, or political. In business, this lesson is particularly relevant. Just as individuals and families need to prepare for the worst, companies must also be ready to adapt, innovate, and survive in the face of uncertainty. In the world of business, this means understanding the risks that are emerging and taking action to mitigate them. This is not the time for complacency or short-term thinking. Companies must begin investing in sustainable practices, preparing for supply chain disruptions, and developing flexible, adaptive business models that can thrive even in the most volatile environments. As the global economy continues to change rapidly, businesses that fail to adapt will quickly be left behind. On a personal level, preparedness means taking steps to secure your future and your well-being. This might involve saving money for an uncertain future, learning new skills, or building strong relationships with others. The most successful individuals are those who are not just reacting to challenges as they arise but are anticipating them and taking proactive steps to overcome them. This means becoming more resilient, adaptable, and resourceful, traits that will be crucial in the face of the coming crises. The need for change and adaptation. One of the most profound lessons that the signs of the apocalypse teach us is the importance of change. Whether it's changing our attitudes towards the environment, politics, or the economy, the status quo is no longer sustainable. We cannot continue down the same path without facing the consequences. In the realm of business, adaptation is not just a luxury, it is a necessity. The companies that thrive in the future will be the ones that embrace change, that are willing to pivot when necessary, and that are open to new ways of doing things. This may mean shifting to more sustainable business practices, embracing new technologies, or redefining the way we think about work and productivity. Companies that remain rigid and resistant to change will find themselves outpaced by more innovative and agile competitors. For individuals, the need to adapt is equally urgent. In a rapidly changing world, the skills that were once valuable may no longer be sufficient. The jobs of tomorrow will require new skills, and the ability to learn and adapt quickly will be a key differentiator in the job market. Now, more than ever, we must invest in education. in acquiring new skills, and in being open to new opportunities. But adaptation is not just about survival, it is about thriving. The future may hold tremendous challenges, but it also holds tremendous potential. We have the ability to shape the world we want to live in. If we are willing to change the way we think and act, if we can embrace change, if we can be flexible and forward-thinking, we can create a future that is not defined by chaos and destruction but by hope, progress, and resilience. The power of unity and cooperation. In times of crisis, perhaps the most important lesson of all is the power of unity. In the face of overwhelming challenges, it is easy to become divided, to focus on our differences, and to turn against one another. But history has shown that it is in moments of crisis that cooperation and solidarity are most needed. Whether it is nations coming together to combat climate change or communities banding together to rebuild after a disaster, the strength of humanity lies in our ability to work together toward a common goal. In the business world, cooperation and collaboration are equally important. The companies that succeed in the future will be the ones that foster collaboration, both internally and externally. Businesses that recognize the value of partnerships, of working with others to solve problems and create value, will be better positioned to navigate the challenges ahead. In a world that is increasingly interconnected, no company can afford to go it alone. On a personal level, unity and cooperation are essential to our well-being. In times of crisis, we need the support of others, whether it is family, friends, or colleagues. Building strong relationships and networks will not only help us navigate difficult times but will also help us grow and thrive in the future. The importance of perseverance and hope. Finally, in the face of the challenges that lie ahead, one of the most powerful tools we have is hope. It may seem counterintuitive to talk about hope in the midst of an apocalypse, but it is precisely in these moments that hope becomes most important. Hope is what drives us to keep going, to keep fighting, even when the odds seem insurmountable. In business, hope is what fuels innovation. It is the belief that there is always a solution, always a way forward, even when things seem bleak. The most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders are those who maintain hope in the face of adversity. They understand that failure is not the end but a part of the process. And that perseverance in the face of challenges is often what separates the successful from the unsuccessful. For individuals, hope is what keeps us moving forward. It is the belief that despite the struggles and hardships we face, there is always the possibility of a better future. The key is to maintain hope, even in the darkest of times. Hope is what gives us the strength to persevere, to keep pushing through, and to ultimately emerge stronger and more resilient. Conclusion: the choice is ours. The world is changing, and the signs of the apocalypse are all around us. Whether it is environmental collapse, political instability, or economic turmoil, the challenges we face are daunting. But rather than viewing these challenges as an inevitable end, we can choose to see them as an opportunity for transformation. The future is not set in stone. We have the power to shape it. We can choose to be proactive, to prepare for the challenges ahead, to adapt to a changing world, and to unite in the face of adversity. By doing so, we can not only survive the apocalypse but thrive in the new world that will emerge. The question is not whether the apocalypse is coming. The question is, how will we respond? Will we face it with fear and resignation, or will we face it with courage, hope, and a determination to build a better future for ourselves and for the generations to come? The choice is ours.